This should work. There we go. Well, on my behalf and McCain's behalf, thanks for coming today and taking time to listen to the presentation of how McCain sees the future of Regen Ag. Also, thanks to Katie and the organization of B-Link to have us here today. Just a few words about myself. Before starting, I studied at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. I'm from the Netherlands and worked since McCain for 2 years now. Worked in North America for a little while and in the Netherlands and now New Zealand to work with growers to see how we can make the next step towards more sustainable agricultural practices. Here today with me is my colleague Sarah. She's the lead agronomist here in New Zealand. You've been working with potatoes for?
Yeah, 6 years.
6 years now. And before that, you worked on the North Island with our vegetable plants, also working on corn, peas, beans, and carrots. So if there are any questions, we'll be happy to take them throughout the presentation or at the end, whatever you prefer. So what I'm trying to do today in a nutshell, I hope to inform you a little bit more about what we do as McCain for a regenerative agricultural approach. So first of all, I'll give you a short introduction of the company and how we came to be, or how we decided to go for a Regen Ag approach. The definition, principle, and concepts, also about our commitments, and I hopefully have enough time to zoom into New Zealand as well, and where we stand right now and how we hope to move forward in the next years. Starting with McCain, so the company was founded in 1957 by two brothers. It's still a family-owned business, but since 65 years, a lot has changed, of course. The company grew over time a lot. We're now active in basically all the continents, and we work together with approximately 3,500 growers. We got the opportunity to expand over the last 65 years. Before the next decades to come, we definitely see some challenges ahead. These are some of them. So, for example, climate change will challenge our potato production in the future for at least some areas. Also, the increasing cost of production will make it harder for our growers to keep their business model viable. Also, a change in government, moving towards more green governance, if you can say it like that, change in regulation will make it more challenging for our growers to maneuver in this complex system. And also, lastly, maybe most important, the continuity of our growers. So we want to make sure that we have that next generation of growers who's willing to grow potatoes, but also able to grow potatoes. So that's why McCain decided to go with a different approach, or derive from business as usual, let's say, and go for a regenerative approach. As I said, McCain is a huge company. We work together with a lot of growers. We have a lot of influence, but also responsibility. So therefore, we want to be part of that solution rather than being part of the problem. So now more the technical part, just for my information, who of you in the audience knows a little bit about regenerative agriculture, is kind of comfortable with working with it? All right, that gives me kind of an idea where I'll pause a little longer than in other areas. McCain's definition is it's an ecosystem-based approach to farm that aims to improve farm resilience, crop yield, and quality by improving soil health, water quality, optimizing water use efficiency, enhancing biodiversity, and reducing the impact of synthetic inputs. That is a lot of words. If I can describe it in my own words, how I'd like to describe Regen Ag is that there are a lot of natural processes already in place. And by optimizing those processes or cycles, the system can become more resilient. So optimizing soil health, crop health can make sure that we become less dependent on external inputs, basically. On the right-hand side, you see the 6 principles that McCain kind of aside or connects to Regen Ag. So at the top, maybe most important is ensure farm resilience. Like I said, that next generation. It's making the farm system as a whole more resilient against, for example, climate change or climate variability, and pests and diseases. But again, that economic point of view is also very important. How can we make sure that those different farm managements are also economically viable? The other 6 principles are there to support and make sure that we get there, basically. So it's armoring the soils, enhance crop and ecosystem diversity, reduce agrochemical impacts and optimize water use, minimize soil disturbance, and integrate organic livestock and organic elements.
Question.
Yes.
Reducing impact of synthetic inputs. Why that rather than just reducing the use of synthetic inputs? Was that a conscious decision?
Can you repeat the question?
So
Sorry.
it says reducing the impact of synthetic inputs. The alternative would be to reduce the total use of synthetic inputs. Was there a particular reason that nuance was used?
I think how you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but how I view it is it's unlike in organic agriculture, let's say, where it's not allowed anymore. It's just about optimizing those inputs. So if there is a pest, a grower can interrupt and interfere, and hope, or it's the idea within Regen Act that we optimize the usage of the product there with the lowest impact for the environment. Does that answer the question?
Kind of.
Yeah, we'll still when we can, try to more organic materials and stuff, we're actually looking at more organic.
Just come without really starting this up. I'm just looking, there's the light and tough project. The horticultural cropping industries are very explicit. They want to get out of pesticides, synthetic pesticides. So it seems interesting to me that this doesn't actually explicitly state we wish to reduce use. This saying we wish to reduce that impact. That's a subtle but I think important difference. It's kind of not bringing in equity quite so much.
Yes, and that's an ecological approach as well.
Yeah, this is not just one, but fair question, thanks. So to zoom in a little bit more, what this is mean on a farm to field level, let's say, we have 7 different indicators on how we would like to promote soil health. So those are very much aligned with the principles that I just mentioned. It's about biodiversity, soil cover, soil disturbance, crop diversity, soil organic matter, toxicity, and optimizing inputs. I'm just going to highlight one of them just to show kind of what we're dealing with. So for example, with soil cover, we try to keep the soil covered for hopefully 365 days a year minus harvest and planting periods. So beside the main crop, think about cover crops, winter crops, perennials, or if that doesn't work, stubble to keep the roots in the ground and protect from soil erosion and keep that soil biology alive. I'll give a better overview of this, or we'll walk through this again for the New Zealand situation a little further down the line. So as McCain, we are trying to monitor the progress as well. I'll highlight the commitments in a second, but to make sure that we get there, we have to, of course, make sure that things are changing along the way. So we have a global framework, one for the North Hemisphere, one for the Southern Hemisphere. Again, these are the 7 indicators that I just mentioned. And these are 3 different thresholds. Basically, it's a ladder system. So depending the level of Regen, if you can say it like that, of a grower or of an area. The first level we have is onboarding. Here, a grower receives a training, soil analysis, so we can establish kind of a baseline, and is working on at least 1 indicator. To go to the next level, the grower has to meet 5 out of the 7 requirements. And that's to include kind of local variability there as well. So he doesn't have to do 7 of the indicators, just 5 out of 7, where the red ones are mandatory, or we see those as such important for the concept of Regen that those are mandatory, which are soil cover and crop diversity. Same train of thought to move further in upon the ladder, let's say, it's again 5 of 7 indicators at the threshold or higher. Yes.
Just pick those up. Okay, so I can't really give it, are they like practices that farmers need to do, or are they outcome thresholds that they need to meet? Like, so for double retention, like there's double retention, but it might be 5% ground cover, so they need to meet like 30% ground cover, for example.
Well, I can pick one out for you if you want to. So again, we keep it at armored soil. So soil cover, the engaged level is 230 days a year. Advanced is 280 days a year, and leading is 320 days a year.
So it would be like full ground cover, half ground cover, or less. So getting too detailed here.
That's we monitor that with satellite imagery, and it's an NDVI of 0.25.
Is that you sell them and involve an industry, and why is that, and how do they differ?
It is slightly different, so the indicators are all the same. I think half of the thresholds are also the same. It mainly has to do with that ground cover because the growing season is just not as long as it is down in the south hemisphere. So it's unfair to ask growers on the north hemisphere to meet those requirements. All right, the global commitments. We want to have on 100% of the acreages, potato acreages, we want to have regen ag practices by 2030. We want to open 3 farms of the future. There are 2 open already, one in Canada, where the company is originally from, and one in South Africa. The last one will be opened later this year, probably. And the focus of these farms of the future are to explore regen ag practices and communicate to the growers in the area. And lastly, we want to have a look at partnerships. We know as McCain, we cannot do this on our own. That's no starting point, basically. So we're looking at other people within the industry or the food chain, if you can say it like that, for collective action. An example here would be Rabobank, where in the Netherlands, we collaborate with Rabobank, so growers who are participating with this initiative get a better interest rate. All right, that was it for the global part. Now we're zooming into New Zealand. Because the global outline, let's say, is set, but every region for themselves can determine how they meet the targets. So that's our job, basically. Sarah and I are heavily involved in that. Just to set the scene a little bit, we have 14 growers here in New Zealand with McCain in the area of Mid and South Canterbury. Our plant is here in Timaru. Some interesting details about our growers, which I noticed maybe they're normal to you guys, but from an outsider perspective, they're pretty interesting. So we have a grower-owned seed cooperation. They just won a small business award 2 weeks ago. So the growers themselves took the initiative to treat the seed better, come up with a higher quality, do better preparations with them. If I say it correctly?
You're wrong.
Okay, great. So they're very hands-on, let's say. Another interesting fact is that McCain in New Zealand is leading for yield, but also for regen ag practices. I'll dive a little bit deeper into that one in the slides to come, but that is an interesting fact or comparison, let's say. And another thing that I found was that the growers have a very specific mindset here, so they're very innovative. Thank you. And they have a very nature inclusive mindset, I would say. They are very interested to know more about it. They already include a lot of these practices. And they're also technologically very advanced. Most of them travel to, for example, Europe or North America on a regular basis to check in on like the newest updates on machinery. Yes.
So you explained earlier that there was a difference between the northern and the southern hemisphere.
Yes.
Who is doing this? What you're saying? Are you Can you unpack that a little bit? So you've got all your different criteria for your baseline and level 1 and
Yes.
level 1. So does it mean that those criteria will be defined per region rather than per farm? Also, how does the kind of the regional aspect come into play?
We all use the same framework that I just showed, except for North and South Hemisphere. That's where the 5 out of the 7 indicators comes into play. Some regions might be more focused on increasing biodiversity, and they score very well on those points, while others have a better soil organic matter level. So that's how we include that regional difference. Does that answer the question?
So it's more in terms of the outcome, is that what you mean, in terms of your reporting and the product that you get, or like in terms of the growth? What's the advantage of having that regional group being set up?
Which regional group?
What you're talking about?
Oh, this is just an explanation of our grower base here in New Zealand. So the people who are producing potatoes, who are farming with us.
So they are not in touch with each other. There's.
I'll get to that in a second. Yes.
Okay. Maybe I'll.
But very good. Yeah. I'll get to that in a second. So I made the same overview that you just saw, but now I filled it in for New Zealand and where we basically stand for New Zealand, based on interviews we did, survey. Am I forgetting anything? Survey, there was something else. I'll come to it. There was another grower-based input that helped us define this. So for biodiversity, we have growers that work with biocontrol release in the shelter belt and nature strips surrounding the paddocks. So they're definitely up to par there and ahead of the most growers worldwide. Same for soil cover. The growers use winter crops most of the time. They have green crops all year round. So again, very much ahead of the curve. For soil disturbance, we do have a challenge. So potato is, of course, a quite intense, soil-intensive product, let's say. So in other crops, we see growers experimenting with, for example, a direct drilling or using direct drilling, I have to say. While in potatoes, we're at the start, let's say, so we're looking at different ways to de-stone the paddocks, but also looking at one-pass planting. Is that a word? Yeah, one-pass planting. For crop diversity, on average, growers now have about 1 in 9, 1 in 8 years potatoes, and have 14 crops in their rotation. So, they also have a lot of replenishing crops, so not all of them are very intensive to the soil. On soil organic matter, they do a lot of soil testing, have relatively high soil organic matter contents, which ties into the amount of grazing on the paddocks. Here, the challenge is to set the regional targets. So to come back to the question to the lady in the back, there's one indicator that we can set regional thresholds for, and that's the level of soil organic matter, because the soil is so variable worldwide. So that's actually one for me to tackle in the next few months together, hopefully with our network and experts on soil organic matter, to see what those thresholds need to be for New Zealand. For the toxicity, we're kind of middle of the playing field compared to the rest of the world. We're not, or New Zealand's not performing at the top there. The main challenge here is potato psyllid. Most of you are probably familiar with it, but a couple years back, we got to endure a new kind of pest. So we're still figuring out how we can keep the pressure low without using tough or heavy chemicals, let's say. And also mancozeb is still kind of widely used, which increases that level of toxicity. But on the other hand, optimized inputs, they have a very good relation with their agronomists. They work along very well, and I would have to say that every input they use agronomical advice. The challenge here for us is organic nutrient input. So, for example, manure, and it's not about using manure, but the availability of manure. So for here, we're looking at a diversification as well. What are our goals for Australia and New Zealand? So in 2027, we want to have 50% of our area on that middle category, the advanced level. And in 2030, we want to have 30% of our acreages under the expert level. As you know, this is a lot more advanced than our global commitments. But yeah, what I just presented, it's a kind of a very advanced region already. So to make sure that we take that next step, we have to have good targets. Now, we have a grower group based around Regen Ag. We only recently started this. And why are we doing this? It's basically to have the grower at the table when we decide how to move forward. How do we want to design the strategy to meet those targets I just presented? So we align our vision and decide on, for example, field trials together. Also, I want to underline that we're looking here to improve on potato productivity. So it's not just around sustainability and Regen Ag, it's also about how can we make a more robust system, more resilient system that will benefit the grower along the lines of Regen Ag. And lastly, it's the two-way communication. So we want to communicate back to the growers how what's happening on our end, but we also want to include their feedback in our strategies. Go ahead.
You've just said that one of your targets or your goals is to increase productivity. Could you unpack that? Do you mean that you want to increase the stability of the productivity over the year, or you want to increase the amount that is being produced?
No, yeah, maybe I should say it a bit more nuanced. You're right. It's not necessarily about increasing yield. It can also be improving on quality, for example, or on reducing the cost. So by becoming less dependent on external inputs. So for example, on chemicals, and reducing the amount of sprays in the field, we can lower the cost and therefore make it more robust. So it's not necessarily, you're right, it's not necessarily then on the tonnage per hectare that comes up, but to make it more viable for a grower to participate in a group like this.
And so just to follow up on that one, so say, for example, it's about reducing the cost of the input. Does it mean that you still commit to buying the potatoes from the growers at the same price, or are you expecting that the pricing you pay is going to increase in accordance to the cost of production?
I didn't study economics. On that question, I'm just going to be honest. I don't have that experience over the last 2 years to know about potato economics. Do you have an idea?
We work closely with growers, so any changes and all of that, we work out. So yeah, we don't have to growers, we have a pretty good relationship.
Sorry, I was just going to ask if we could let Tika complete her presentation. We do have time for Q&A at the end. So I know that there's some burning questions, but if I could ask if you could hold on to them just so that we can get through the presentation, because we would like to allow for that Q&A time at the end, and then we do have networking. So if there is something that we don't get to ask Tika, there will be some time at the end and maybe you could ask her individually. Sure.
No, that's all right. Okay, no problem. Can you hold on to the end? Would that be all right? Okay, cheers. Thank you. Like I said, we're trying to use grower input to decide on what we want to look for in the field. Our agronomy department has always been doing field trials, but now we want to focus those field trials more onto like Regen Ag. And these are some of the pressure points we identified over the last few months, basically. The two main points for us to improve on is like minimizing that synthetic input, whether it's plant protection products or synthetic fertilizer, and minimizing the soil compaction. And then I'll continue, I think, for time reasons. If there's any questions, I would love to unpack them a bit more in the Q&A. One of an example of a trial we did this year is a targeted spray program. I just already briefly mentioned the TPP in the area, which increased the amount of chemicals. So here we're trying to compare, that's the word I was looking for, compare the calendar spray, which is needed for TPP at the moment, with a more targeted spray, where together with the farm manager, the agronomist, and McCain, we try to come up with a more like field-specific recommendation for chemical applications. Besides that, we also planted nature strips, and we released beneficials throughout the season 3 times to further lower the pressure of TPP. It's kind of a where is Waldo picture, but here you can see the releasing of the beneficials. And this is in combination with CPLI. I don't know, probably maybe some of you are familiar, but that's an initiative where the potato industry and the university as well, and the growers, and Planet Food, they're all combined to tackle this TPP issue. We definitely got some more learnings from this experiment than results so far. We try to continue this in the next few years. Like one of the learnings we got away is that the nature strips, for example, have to be planted a lot earlier to make sure that when they come up and are flowering, we can release the beneficials in there. Now the potatoes were already up and the nature strips weren't yet, so it was harder to release those beneficials. And another point is that luckily the TPP pressure was very low this year, but it made it very hard for us to come up with actual results and compare the 2 treatments. This is my second to last slide, but it's a very interesting one. We worked together with Sustainable Agricultural Initiative to come up with a success story for New Zealand and their farming. 10 years ago, there was a study on the yield gap for New Zealand. The yields were basically stagnant, slightly decreasing, as you can see here, in 2012. The main reasons or limitations there identified by the studies were soil-borne diseases and seed quality. However, if we look at today, like I said, New Zealand is the highest yielding area with very good quality of potatoes. So it's interesting for us to now look back and see what has changed over those 10 years and how can we kind of, see what those indicators are for yield improvements. And it's interesting to see that they very much align with the regen ag practices that I just mentioned. The main one is the rotation. Widening of the rotation is very likely to be attributed to such a good increase of yield and lowering the soil-borne diseases. So more to come. More details about this will be presented in a story by the SAI platform in the next few weeks. But it's just to underline how McCain envisions this regen ag process and how this area can become a success story or an inspiration for other regions as well. This is my final slide, just to show you that we're not just looking at growers to improve on sustainability as well. As McCain, we make a lot of commitments regarding sustainability, also on our manufacturing end as well. And we have an annual report on sustainability to check where we are at. So, for example, now 20% of our total electrical energy consumption comes from renewable energies. Just to give you an idea that we're not just looking at the growers, but company-wide, we're looking to see how we can make the business more future-proof. That's it.
Thank you. Really
Thank you.
interesting stuff. And thank you, and I'm sorry for stopping the Q&A in the middle because I know that we've had this time at the end. So I'm thinking that it could be a popular Q&A session. So we'll get through as many questions as we can. And I'd love to invite you to ask your question first if it's so.
Yeah. Thanks very much. The slide that you were on was talking about increasing productivity and things. And I wondered whether sort of potential environmental impact was one of those things you were trying to reduce that as part of increasing productivity. I guess that, you know, spuds are known as pretty high nutrient use crop. And
They are.
potentially therefore there's a environmental impact and leakage and things. I just wondered whether measurements or anything around that were part.
Where that fits in. That is actually
Yeah, I was gonna say, potatoes in have done a lot of work on that.
Yeah.
While doing it, so, yeah, so we'll probably leave that work to them, it's kind of done, and we are probably putting on the right amount that we're taking off. Our nitrogen use efficiency for our crops is quite good. When we look at what's going on with the wire, yeah, we're up there.
70%,
Yeah.
70.
It was worldwide.
Yeah, but what the work that potatoes media was doing right in New Zealand. And also then we generally, most of our potato crops would follow on with the wheat crop. And that's generally how they.
So does Potatoes NZ have like a target or a trend line they're wanting to follow?
They are working with, this is, sustainable vegetable systems, is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that project. And they're doing the work, Andrew Barber's in the middle of it. So, yeah. So there's work being done down here as well, so there's quite a big difference in what we do in integrated versus what I think, but, yeah.
We'll start with the gentleman in the blue shirt. Yeah.
So your program's following normal cane crops. Are you following all the other crops in the rotation farm and the intervening years?
On some,
See what practices are done there and that time span?
that's a very valid point. As Regen Ag is not just for potatoes, it's a farm-wide transition.
Not just doing regen for your potato crop for that year and then they revert back to their standard practice.
No.
Whatever they do.
No, we one of the obstacles there is that we do not have permission from the growers, let's say, to have all that data. So we don't have the data from the growers what nutrients go on to their other crops, for example. So what we're trying to, this framework specifically is for potato. The SAI, however, the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative, that's where all the different industries come together and align on one platform. That's where we're a phase that we're currently in. They piloted one of the frameworks last year in New Zealand, and they're now refining it exactly to avoid what you're saying.
You just can't turn off, on and off regions for your crop
No.
next year.
No, you're right.
System.
No, and that's again, with direct drilling, most people are doing it anyway, and what are they doing in the other crops? What could be improved there? And that's, I suppose, because in our global world, we're a little bit advanced here in New Zealand, so we're the ones they're looking at going, okay, how do we incorporate everything else that's going on? So it's something that will just be a work in progress.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
So when you talk about increased production in terms of increased quality, are you talking about size, shape, nutrient level, disease resistance, or combination?
Well, for our company, there's definitely length. That's for us as a business quite important. But some of the quality improvements where we could look at is the
Things that relate to soil-borne diseases.
yes, the soil borne diseases. Yes.
So no munchies, potatoes, basically.
Basically, yes, that's what we're trying to avoid worldwide, let's say. For New Zealand, maybe that's a little different or already further advanced.
That was my very technical scientific term.
Yeah.
Disease.
Yeah, sorry.
So how are you going to approach soil-borne diseases
In worldwide,
here in New Zealand?
Well, what was currently from that study that was done 10 years ago, the rotations have come out.
Yeah.
And then, I think, they're very, obviously soil-borne diseases are very hard to work with. And there's probably a lot of work going on outside of the plans within New Zealand. We're like the guy in Tasmania's, Tasmania's doing quite a bit of work on battery scab. And our view at the moment is probably what's in the rotational crop and keeping the rotations as long as we can.
So you're looking at soil fertility?
Yeah, and there's some of that going on with the STEM project as well. Yeah. Always keen for, I guess.
I'm getting the blue back.
I'm very interested to know
with your presentation, because basically New Zealand crop farming is already compared to the rest of the world is incredibly regenerative. Because there's got you presented 1 in 9 year crop rotation and up over 10 different crop species in the rotation. Therefore, you put the New Zealand grower already in a position where they expect to deliver on a very high level. When you compare it to the northern part of France, where they've got in a 1 in 4 year crop rotation, and they've got sugar beet in a rotation and only some cereals, and the whole paddock, everything is bare during the winter. How are you going to compare those feed and egg principles compared to France in here and recognize the farmers here in New Zealand, what they're doing ahead of what's happening in France and anywhere else in the world? And I'm a bit worried about the 1 in 9 year rotation, because we're going to see Pukekohe is going to be built in houses, and potatoes normally grown in Pukekohe will come down south to meet Canterbury. So we're going to see an increase in hectares, and the crop rotation is going to be smaller. And I've got a bit of experience on the other side of the world,
Yes.
your country.
Yes.
What it means, if you've got a very narrow crop rotation, you run in not only saltwater, so scarce, but nematodes is a big, is going to be a massive issue. So what are you going to do about that? And recognize farmers in to stay viable, to have a wide crop rotation.
Can I answer?
Yes. Go ahead. Sure. Yeah.
So if
Go for it.
look back 10 years, that's when that study came about, actually with the McCain growers and McCain coming together going, what's our yield issues? Did the project. And since that time, we've had a 20 to 25% yield increase. And most of that still works. And there's some stuff done with the seed. And a grower said to me, it was when we were doing some of these interviews, he said one thing we learned is we had to go out and lease land for a couple of years and get our rotations out. We now grow more on less. So instead of growing on 100 hectares, they're now down to 80 hectares growing the same code. So that's where and that's, I guess that's our regen story. You're saying we are already kind of doing it. We've started a lot of the processes back then, / a lot of New Zealand growers, that's just the farming systems here. But yeah, we're trying to show globally what can be done as well. I know everyone doesn't have as many options as we do here in Canterbury for other crops, but just looking at, if you look at things differently, how can you get these rotations out, get yields up, because of those sort of diseases. And we are aware of, competition is probably going to increase. And we have those conversations, but most of our growers, they're a lot happier than they were 10 years ago. We just recently had a global ag conference here, and we took the agronomists to meet the growers, and they couldn't believe their mindset and just how happy they were with everything and their whole view on the soils and everything else. So that's kind of a rotation thinking, I think. So I don't know. We have a couple of growers, and one of them was there that night, and he's still lower on the rotations, what he does, and his yield starts steaming. And he said to the others, I'm the only one not increasing my So
Yeah, Marina.
Really inspirational talk. Thank you so much. Having seen all this, is McCain also investing or involving itself in marketing the strategy to the customer?
Yes and no, not on a large scale. I think in the end they are looking at ways to do so, but we're not there yet. I know, for example, one of the farms of the future, the one in Canada, actually, for 1 year they used the produce of that year for an event, one-time release of Regen egg fries, and just to see how that would feel and go. I actually haven't heard from it since. I will catch up with the people in Canada later this week. good idea, but it is something that they are thinking about, I think.
Because I think the customer would really value to know that you are really working on that strategy, and then the competitors will also have to come on board with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it will probably take a couple of years, I assume, also because when we make the claim that it's Regen Ag price, we have to have the monitoring in place to back up the claims. And we're working on that. We're paving the way, but it's a lot more difficult than it seems. So we want to have that in place, I think, before making that absolute claim.
Did have a supplemental, but kind of answered it in there, so.
I'm just gonna, why would a grower want to be expert rather than engaged? What's that?
That's a good question.
The grower no longer licensing that is rising here at this stage, so is it
Uh-huh.
cost reduction, is it, they see it just makes it way, what's why?
I think part of it is to become a more competitive grower. If you look at the last graph we showed with the increase in yield, with, for example, with the wider rotation, I think that might motivate some growers. I know on the Dutch end, for example, with the Rabobank thing, if they are in a certain category, they have more or less auditing, or they have more interest in their different packages. But yeah, that could also be a motivation.
So for New Zealand growers, probably be seeing maybe a from.
We
So they kind of be also on hearing otherwise.
And we're probably working. So we'll see where things sit. As I said, ideally we're looking at trying to lower costs and some of the things.
Yes.
But there may be something with the bank or something like that. And that's one of the things we'll again discuss when we with directly with our growers and the Regen Ag focus group.
Yeah, and I think that's also where talking to the growers, they see a lot of our in a way how we as McCain as a multinational company can support the growers in having those conversations with banks or with ag manufacturers to get them, I don't know, better deals on Regen Ag equipment. It's not something yet, but just yeah, those type of deals McCain can maybe help out. Yes.
You mentioned that there was a bit of a shortage on manure side of things. But the growers are using compost, so they're getting it off-site. And if so, are they concerned about the chemical contamination that can be in the places that increase the disease? Is that sort of building up toxicity in the soil?
I wouldn't say in New Zealand so far. I've seen it in the Netherlands though. Our measure at the moment is to have a certain percentage of the inputs of the nutrient inputs from an organical source. We're looking at, for example, or one of the things that was mentioned in the slide was mushroom compost. It's very popular back home, but there are some concerns from the grower there that we first need to tackle before we are gonna widely promote it, let's say. But we're looking at more of a diversification, what options there are, what is available.
We just have one last question. Yeah.
It's an invitation, like, there's a lot of wisdom in this room, and a way to capture that might be to send out, to invite people here to give some contact details and put 10 to 20 hours into those conversations, and your names will be out of it. Particularly with your soil organic matter benchmarking.
Yes.
You're planning to do, especially in this area, so something about.
Great idea, thank you.
We'll end on that. If you could join me again in thanking Tika and Sarah for your time and knowledge. Whilst I have you all captive, I'm just going to take a second to talk about some other upcoming events that we have. Activator sessions, these are one-on-one appointments with a business mentor. Really great if we have any entrepreneurs in the audience. You are what you eat. That's a bit of a tongue twister. And that's part of our excellence series, and Professor Pablo Gregorini will be speaking at that one. We have the future of New Zealand's agricultural workforce coming up. And that's it. And thank you all again for watching. Please don't leave too quickly. There's still lots more drinks and food to be had.